And first this morning, the heartbreaking reality of President Biden's border crisis exposed. This weekend, 19 GOP senators traveled to the Rio Grande Valley to witness the impact of the administration's immigration policies firsthand. We sent a photographer along to document it, but he was banned. He was told, "You're not coming." When the senators tried to take cell phone pictures and videos, they too were hassled. Texas Senator Ted Cruz recorded a confrontation he had with a Biden handler sent by DHS to stop them. You will not believe this. We are showing it to you right here for the first time. Watch.
Please give dignity to the people. Please give dignity to the people.
So you work for the commissioner, your senior advisor. You were hired 2 weeks ago, and you're instructed to ask us to not have any pictures taken here.
Please respect the people.
Because the political leadership at DHS does not want the American people to know it.
Please don't treat the people.
You're right, and this is a dangerous place.
Please don't treat the people
and your
like
policies,
this.
unfortunately, are trying to hide them. I understand you were instructed. When 18 senators came down here,
please respect the people, give them dignity and respect.
I respect them, and I want to fix this situation.
We all want to fix
this. And the administration you're working for is responsible for these conditions.
Senator Ted Cruz led the delegation. He joins me right now. He sits on the Senate Judiciary and the Foreign Relations Committees. And Senator, good morning to you. Thank you for all of your work this weekend. What can you tell us?
Well, Maria, good morning. It's good to be with you. We spent a day and a half down at the border, and I'll tell you, it is bad. I've been to the border many, many times. It is the worst that I've ever seen it. It is a full-blown crisis. Last month, the month of February, we had over 100,000 illegal aliens crossing over. Roughly 30,000 of them were unaccompanied minors, kids. And just today, the Biden administration has over 16,000 children in custody. We went and toured the Biden cages. You know, for 4 years, we heard Democrats in the media talking about kids in cages under President Trump. Joe Biden has built more cages. The cages are bigger and they're more full. The Donna facility, where that video you just showed was taken, the Donna facility is this giant tent city that they've built. It's massive. It's designed to hold 1,000 people, but under COVID restrictions, its capacity is 250. It right now has over 4,000 people in it. It is at a 1,500% capacity, and that meant you saw in these cages children, little boys and little girls, side by side. They're not 6 feet apart. They're not 3 feet apart. They're not even 6 inches apart. They're lying on the floor. There are no beds. They're lying on the floor side by side. They're covered with aluminum foil emergency blankets. And in that facility, the children there are testing positive for COVID at roughly a 10% rate. So they're locking them in these cages where COVID in a pandemic is a real risk. It is inhumane. It is unconscionable. And it's the direct result of the political decisions that Joe Biden has made.
You know, President Trump had a health emergency plan in place. Anybody who entered illegally was told they're going back, and they were sent back. But Biden carved out families and kids who are 6 years or under. And of course, that's what the smugglers and the cartels heard. So they're coming up with quote unquote families with 6-year-olds or younger. And they're selling those kids. They're renting those kids. How much money are these cartels getting by renting kids?
Well, they get between $4,000 and $6,000 per person they bring across the border. We are seeing an instance of more and more young males arriving with kids. When those kids are DNA tested against those males, many of those males are not related to those kids. And what the cartels are doing is they understand the weakness and the loopholes in the Biden administration's policy. And if a young adult male, possibly a criminal, possibly a gang member, if they want to come into this country, all they have to have is a kid. And so we're seeing the cartel members renting kids, renting babies, renting little children. Of course, many of those kids then are physically abused or sexually abused, and they're seeing those kids then coming multiple times with multiple different adults. It is tragic. And, you know, Maria, it's one of the things that's frustrating because many Democrats like to pretend their open border policies are somehow humane. There is nothing humane about what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing at the border. They're subjecting kids to horrific abuse. They're endangering their lives in a pandemic by keeping them locked up in cages right on top of each other. And then they're releasing illegal aliens into the United States who are testing positive for COVID at a rate 7 times higher than the U.S. population. This is a humanitarian crisis, it is a health crisis, and it's a national security crisis.
Well, it was also preventable, Senator. Let's take a look at some of the moves that Joe Biden made on day 1, day 2, and then in the first 60 days. We've got some of the more important issues here. Tell me what you believe to be the most important things that he did to reverse what was actually a declining situation in terms of surges at the border. What was most impactful by his policy? He owns this.
Well, I think there are 3 critical decisions that Joe Biden made in the first week as president. Number 1, he immediately halted construction of the border wall. And we saw sections of the border wall where literally they're half done and there's rusted rebar everywhere. They just left it. They just left it with holes in it. And of course, the illegal traffic is streaming through those holes. Number 2, Joe Biden reinstated the failed catch and release policy, which, in other words, when someone is caught, they end up being given a court date sometime in the future, released, and everyone knows a very small percentage of them ever show up again. And number 3, and this was probably the most inexplicable, Biden ended the Remain in Mexico agreement. This was an incredible agreement that President Trump had negotiated with the nation of Mexico. The government of Mexico agreed that those people from Central America traveling illegally through Mexico would remain in Mexico while they had asylum cases proceeding in the United States. And when that was put in place, it worked. We saw the numbers drop. Last year, we had the lowest rates of illegal immigration in 45 years. And Maria, I'll tell you, I spoke with 2 different people down at the border, 2 different Border Patrol leaders, one senior leader, one the head of the union, both of whom met with the Biden transition team before Joe Biden came into office, and both of them told Joe Biden directly, or the transition team directly, if you end the Remain in Mexico policy, you will see a massive influx of illegal aliens. They predicted it. The Biden team knew this, but their politics forced them to make a decision that is now resulting in massive human suffering and tragedy. And they don't know what to do because their politics won't let them change. And so this is getting worse every day.
Well, how is it possible that their politics won't let them change? Don't we all agree on things like a humanitarian crisis is not what we want to be involved in? Don't we all agree that we shouldn't have 6- and 10-year-olds in such danger that there could be sexual assault on their way to, making believe that they're with someone who's their father when it really isn't? So who's running the show here?
Yeah. Well, look, that's an open question. It's clear Joe Biden is not. He hasn't gone to the border. He's not running things. He doesn't know what's going on. We saw this past week he put Kamala Harris in charge, which made me wonder how much he disliked Kamala to hand this crisis to her. She had it for a couple of days, and then we saw the announcement Kamala's not in charge either. She's not going to the border. She laughed at the idea of going to the border. So nobody knows who's in charge. But it is an example, and for Kamala, she either quit, she either looked at this and said, this is too much of a mess, I want out of here, or she was fired. The Biden administration, Kamala Harris has called Border Patrol agents, she's analogized them to the KKK, which is truly disgusting. And I'll tell you, the agents down there, they remember it. They remember when somebody on national television calls you a Klansman and you're a federal law enforcement officer risking your life to keep this country safe. They remember that. So she was the wrong person to head this. But nobody is heading this. And the problem for Democrats, they start from a premise that the more illegal immigration we have, the better, because they believe if you let all the illegal immigrants in and then you make them all citizens, that they will eventually vote Democrat and keep Democrats in power. But they also don't understand incentives. So you hear Jen Psaki saying, well, we're just not going to keep kids, which is, of course, a lie because there's 16,000 kids in Biden cages right now. But they don't get the incentives that when they announce any child that comes can stay, that we will see, it's projected that over 100,000 unaccompanied minors will come in. And I've got to say, anyone that puts a little boy or little girl in the custody of a human trafficker, Maria, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls are put on birth control pills before they come up because the odds are so high they'll get raped. That is not compassionate when the Biden administration has all these kids in the custody of traffickers.
This is so heartbreaking. Senator, before you go, this is just one part of a massive radical agenda. They want to get H.R. 1 through. You know, you would think that this humanitarian crisis is the number one priority for Democrats, but it isn't. The number one priority is making sure that they stay in power with this H.R. 1 election bill. Your thoughts on that, as well as filibuster? If they remove the filibuster, they'll be able to get the election H.R. 1 bill through and everything else, including stacking the Supreme Court.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think H.R. 1 is actually directly connected to this border crisis. You know, many are calling H.R. 1 the Corrupt Politicians Act because it is their number one priority to keep Democrats in power for the next 100 years. And one of the most dangerous things that the Corrupt Politicians Act does is it automatically registers everyone to vote if you interact with the government. So if you get a welfare payment, if you get an unemployment payment, if you get a driver's license, if you go to a public college or university. Now, they know that that will automatically register millions of illegal aliens. That is the intended purpose of the bill, is to have millions of illegal aliens and millions of criminals, millions of felons automatically registered. This bill repeals every state law restricting voting rights for felons, because apparently Democrats think we'd be better off if more murderers and rapists and child molesters were voting. It also strikes down virtually every state election integrity law. So 29 states have voter ID laws. It strikes them all down, which facilitates fraud. It is a profoundly dangerous bill. In fact, I think the Corrupt Politicians Act is the single most dangerous bill before the United States Congress, and it is the number one priority for Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
Unbelievable. Senator, thanks very much for all the breaking news this morning and for your work on this. Senator Ted Cruz, we're going to